So we're here at the Silverstone Museum amongst our IndyCar exhibit celebrating the Indy 500, and I'm here with celebrated Indy 500 engineer Andy Brown. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Good to be here.
Andy, you've been at Indy and been very, very successful at the Indy 500, but tell me a little bit about how your career started off, because you weren't always working in IndyCars, were you?
No, obviously I'm a Brit, and I'd always wanted to get into motorsports in some shape or form, but back when I was a lad, which was a few years ago now, there weren't all the courses that they have for motorsports engineering these days. So I decided to take the course of join the aircraft industry. My true claim to fame is putting toilets in the last Concorde ever made. So
wow, now that's something we didn't expect to get out of the interview.
No, forget the 4 Indy 500 wins. There's a perhaps I shouldn't call it a supersonic. Yeah, you know what begins with S, but there we go. And then the idea was turn the wings upside down and go racing, because back then it was engineer on the Formula 3000 project, before moving up to the Formula 1 team as Gugelmin's engineer in 88 through 91.
Right.
And then moved to Brabham for a year as Martin Brundle's engineer. But Brabham folded and I'd had enough of Formula 1 by then. Went back to March Roots, although it was then called Galma. And that's where the IndyCar kicked off from 92 onwards.
And 92 for Galma, that was quite a special year at the Indy 500.
Oh, absolutely. I think we are the last people to have won Indy with a homegrown car, if you like. It was a chassis of our own design and manufacture, built in Bicester, like as the marches were. So yeah, very much a British victory as I see that one.
And how did it feel coming from the world of F1? And, you know, that March was relatively famous in those Leighton House colours, and you had Maurizio Gugelmin and Ivan Capelli you were working with. But you came over to Indy and then successful straight away almost. How was that as a difference between Formula 1 and IndyCar?
They were a lot more similar back then. IndyCar, you could design and manufacture your own car. Or even if you didn't, if you bought a Lola, for instance, you'd strip the thing down and you'd replace the bits you thought needed replacing, or you could make go faster. And the F1 education was a very good learning process for IndyCar as it was back then.
So the aero work and everything that you'd done really, really helped. So when you moved on to working with the Indy 500 as a race, focusing on that for a couple of minutes, how is that different to races that you might have attended in F1? Because I'm assuming you've been to Monaco, you've been to Monza, you've been to Silverstone, all those celebrated names. But how different is the Indy 500, the atmosphere and things like that?
Well, as a race, it is completely different. You look at the road course races in IndyCar and you might think those are quite similar to Formula 1. But Indy 500, it's more like endurance racing. And I think Alonso Jr. actually put it best that year. It's endurance racing with a difference, because it's not just the race being 500 miles, which can take 3 to 4 hours. Back then it was the whole month of May. There were 2 qualifying weekends. There were 2 weeks of practice. And the reason he called it endurance racing was by the end of the second week, the crew is just about ready to bite each other's heads off. You've lived in each other's pockets for 2 weeks. But then the race itself, there are obviously multiple pit stops. The strategy always used to be just try and stay on the lead lap, keep the leader in sight until the last pit stop. And then you push for it in the last 10, 15 laps. But it's become more of a flat-out sprint these days. Well, another thing that struck me when I first went over there is just how important the race is to the people of Indianapolis. People say, well, when do you start looking forward to the Indy 500? And they say the day after the race. And it's the same with the teams. When do you start preparing for the Indy 500? Well, the day after the race. It used to be a whole month-long event. Like we said, 2 weeks of practice, 2 qualifying weekends, 4 full days of qualifying, then carb day and the race. But if you ask any of the competitors, would they rather win the Indy 500 or would they rather win the championship, they'll all say they want to win the Indy 500. It's got such prestige. You even go and meet the President of the United States as the winning team. You're on national TV. It used to be the David Letterman show the night after the race, being interviewed. I don't think we have an event in this country that has such prestige. Maybe in France they have the Le Mans 24 hours, which has a similar standing. Yeah. But it really does grab the imagination of the nation. It's 400,000 people, they say. I think it's slightly fewer now. Now that it has to be all seating. When you had the snake pit and the riots that were going on down there, it could have been 400,000 people. And it is the largest single day sporting event in the world. Yeah. It really is.
Yeah. So you mentioned the snake pit. It's something we've not covered in any of our things. So the snake pit even continues today. And as I understand,
they've brought it back, but it's in a very sanitised form.
Yeah, but people buy tickets and literally don't come out of the snake pit, do they? They miss the race. They watch it on a screen, just ready for the band.
Cars set on fire in there, and people just rolling in mud. And
yeah, it's like a cross between Glastonbury and some rock metal concert, isn't it? Inside a motorsport event. It's something we didn't put into our exhibition. We didn't really have a lot of space for it, but I'm glad you've brought that up.
I'm not sure there are any survivors you could interview, are there?
Are you saying you didn't attend, Andy?
No, I was too busy, I'm afraid. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it.
Although I believe Colton Herter nowadays, he's a bit of a rock star, isn't he? Mm-hmm. He plays his guitar and things. Hasn't he attempted to be on stage at all yet for any of those after the race, do you reckon?
No, a bit of an ageing rocker. A bit too old for that.
So how, from an engineering point of view, do you have to change your focus then? So looking at it, obviously it was a different type of race then than it is now. How would engineers approach things a little bit differently?
Well, because of the multiple pit stops, you can actually work on the car through the race. And that's something that Rick Mears was especially good at. And because it's such a long race, it used to start a bit earlier there in the day than it does now. The track conditions will change a lot as well during the course of the event. The track temperature will increase, rubber and oil going down. You might want to start the race with a bit more downforce because of running in the pack or what have you, and the track being green. And then you'll trim the car, rebalance the car, you'll adjust tyre pressures. Maybe not the same adjustment each side at the front or at the rear. If you're trying to cure understeer, you might put more pressure in the left rear, right rear, for instance, and vice versa. So, yeah, there's a lot you can do as an engineer.
So there's a lot in there. So, obviously, it's that relationship with your drivers as well. And you've worked with some amazing drivers. You've won it 4 times. Who are the best drivers that stand out for you at the Indy 500?
Probably someone I didn't win it with, and that would have been Dan Wheldon. The race in 2006, I think, is the one that hurts. We should really have won that race. We absolutely dominated it. But he got a puncture late in the race. Some said he ran over a beer can, of all things. And yeah, so we ended up back in the pack after having to do a lap on a slowly deflating tyre. But Dan's feel for a car on the ovals was exceptional. To have a car that's fast at Indy, you don't want to be turning the steering wheel in the corners. Right. You actually want to be holding the car straight on the straights. You want to be applying right hand down pressure, and then when you come to the corner, you just release the pressure on the steering wheel, and the car will turn itself into the corner. And then when you're in the middle of the corner, you just want no pressure on the steering wheel at all. The car should just be driving itself around the corner, if you like. And then as you come off the corner, you have to apply the right hand down again, otherwise it'll just keep turning. And Dan said, what I want the car to feel like, it mustn't have understeer, because then I'm applying steering lock and it's scrubbing speed. If it's oversteering, you're really scrubbing speed, or worse. He said, it's got to feel like a hovercraft to me.
Wow.
And I said, you're mental. You've got no feedback, basically, if you wanted to feel like a hovercraft. Yeah. You've got no feeling of grip. He said, no, that's when it's not scrubbing speed. That's when it's going through the corner absolutely as fast as it can. And he's the only one that's ever asked me for that.
That's, as an insight, that's absolutely amazing. And to hear that, and Dan is someone that we sadly lost a number of years ago, but incredibly successful at the Indy 500. And it's amazing to hear those kind of stories. I've actually got goosebumps hearing that. No, genuinely, it's such a lovely story. You also work with Dario Franchitti. We've got a big piece of him, big picture of him up in the exhibition here. How was it working with Dario? Again, another very successful British driver.
Yeah, he had his own dedicated engineer by the name of Chris Simmons, who's an ex-Indy Lights driver. Very, very good race engineer. Because of that driving experience, can relate well to the drivers. My role at that stage with Ganassi, because Dario had taken over the 10 car that Dan had driven. I was running the aero program then, and I worked with Dario on that program, because at Ganassi we don't have a wind tunnel, they have a tunnel. It's through a mountain in Pennsylvania. It's an old motorway tunnel, if you like. It's closed off at each end because they wanted to widen the road, so they built a new road around the tunnel. Chip did a deal with the Pennsylvania state authorities to lease the tunnel, resurfaced it as smooth as it can be, and we actually drive the race car up and down this tunnel. And so Dario was part of that program. He used to hate me because he'd want to get out for a pee, and I'm saying, well, we're in the middle of a sequence, so we need 2 more runs. And then he'd look at me, and his eyes, as he'd come in, and I'd send him down the tunnel again, and you could tell he was seething. But Dario's mentality was very detail orientated, and that's why he was very good at the aero program, because at Indy you're looking for very, very small gains. You're all running the same basic package, but that's why this Ganassi wind tunnel program was so good, because we were working on the full-scale car with full-scale bits. We could see these very small improvements, these very small changes, and that's what Dario was very, very good at picking out. And also on the racetrack with the setup, he could nitpick away at it. He could drive you mad as an engineer, because he'd be changing the headrest by 1/8 of an inch. No, that's too much. 1/16 of an inch back again. But when a driver delivers, when you give him what he wants,
absolutely,
you go out of your way to give him what he wants.
That level of detail. I tell you, to hear these stories it's just amazing, and you know, it's great. You've brought some objects along with you. Are you right for us to have a quick talk through some of these objects, because we've got some things that are quite interesting. And the first thing that jumped out of me when we got the bags out of your car a little while ago, and I noticed the suspension of the back of your car suddenly lift.
You thought we were going to do a smash and grab or something.
I was wondering what you'd got with you, and I'm going to get the camera to come in here, because the Indy 500 circuit is known as the Brickyard, and it was known as the Brickyard for a reason, because it was originally paved in bricks. Tell us about this brick, and particularly the story of how you found them, because you've brought 3 of them along today. They're absolutely wonderful. The detailing on them, you can even see the date, the printed there, the 1901 on there. Yeah. Tell us about these bricks.
Well, like you say, the whole track originally was paved. We'll have to look it up on Google or whatever as to how many, but there were tens of thousands of these bricks. And you can still see the yard of bricks, as they call it to this day, at the start-finish line. I don't know what it must have been like, sort of racing around at over 100 miles an hour on basically a cobbled street. But that's what they would do. And as you say, they're not like your modern
they are very
house
heavy.
brick.
Yeah, very heavy.
They're substantial.
Yeah.
And you can see the wear in them from the years of use. But as the cars got quicker, like I say, just running at those speeds on basically a cobbled street, they did decide to resurface the track. Originally, I think they left the whole of the pit straight still as bricks.
Yes, it was. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
But from turn 1, the entry to turn 1, all the way to the exit of turn 4, they tore all the bricks up. And then eventually they did the rest of the track. But they simply just dumped all these bricks in a stream, in a brook at the back of the track. And they just lay there for years and years and years. And I didn't know they were there. A friend of mine who ran Speedway engines by the name of Rick Long heard that I was coming back to England and said, you should have a brick or 2 to take back as a souvenir. Because I've since found out people have paved their driveways with them. The IndyCar team members, people you don't begrudge them doing it, have done this sort of thing. I think the Speedway and the track have now realised the value of them. I don't know if I'm going to get a letter now saying we want our bricks back.
Now we're going public with this as well. But these are something that we're going to have on you're going to loan these to us to have on display here at the museum. So people can come and see the original bricks over the course of this.
It's great to have them on display rather than just... I use it as a doorstop at home, would you believe?
So your door's going to be shutting at home while we've got them here. I'm going to be very, very delicate with this one, and I'll let you talk about it. But the other celebrated item about the Indy 500 is the drivers don't celebrate with champagne, they celebrate with milk. And it goes back to a sponsorship deal in the early days of the 500. But this milk bottle is quite special. And it's, I'll let you tell us a little bit about the insignia and why you've got this bottle of milk and what's written on the front.
Yeah, well, like you say, the drivers get given a bottle of milk. They actually get to choose whether they want lactose-free or skimmed, semi-skimmed or whatever. What I don't understand is why some of them pour it over their heads afterwards, because it must make everything stink dark.
Yeah, when they're sitting through those interviews afterwards. Yeah.
But then as a crew member, you get given your own baby bottle. Yeah, the milk went sour years ago. But, yeah, fortunately I got Dario to sign it for us. And
So because he's written something quite unique for you on that, hasn't he?
Oh, Brune, yeah, but it's being a Scotsman, he can't speak English properly. Yeah. So, yeah, Andy Brune.
That is absolutely brilliant to have one of the original the milk bottles signed by Dario here. And again, that's going to be on display here at the museum. Now, there's some rather bling jewellery that we've got here. And I know you're about to head back over to the 500 tomorrow, aren't you? And you're going to take one of them with you to wear.
Yeah, posing again.
Yeah, but tell us about these rings, why we've got them here, and why they're so special. And they're absolutely lovely.
It's something the Americans do, isn't it? When you graduate from high school, you get a ring. But it's a great thing to have when you've put all that effort in and actually come out victorious at the Speedway, to have something like this as a memento. Family heirlooms they've become. I've only got 3 children, though, but I don't think I'll get busy at my age. And they started off as fairly ornate. This one's from 1992, which I think is my favourite.
Your first one.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see it, but it does actually have your name on it with a little pit stop. What would you call that? Scene?
So yes, it is a pit scene there.
And then on the other side, it's actually got the pit straight at the track with the timing tower and the wing tyre logo.
Amazing.
And at the top, it's not a real diamond, unfortunately, but even so, it's still
and
still
these
impressive.
Other ones, I'm right in thinking these ones are the ones that have the driver numbers on the side.
Yes, they're from 2008 with Dixon, Scott Dixon, and then 2010 and 2012 with Dario.
Right.
But I believe the 2012 one, it might have been a mistake, or it could have been 2010. It's still got a number 10 on it, which was his regular race car number, but to celebrate 50 years of Target, our sponsors, he actually raced with the number 50 that year, but they made a mistake on the ring and still has a number 10 on it.
And these are another feature, because these aren't seen very much, certainly Indy 500 winners' rings.
They're kept under lock and key as well.
And what we're going to do is these are going to be on a case on display in the museum with a number of the other artifacts. And you've brought a couple of helmets along. We've got one of Dan Wheldon, who you've talked about here. Tell us a little bit about Dan's helmet that we've got here.
Yeah, this one isn't from Indy, but it is an actual race winner. It's from the first year I worked with him. It's the last race of the year when we had to win, and Sam Hornish had to be lower than third for us to take the championship. Dan did his piece. He did win the race. Scott Dixon, our teammate, was second, but unfortunately Sam Hornish was third, and he took the championship on count back on wins, because we had same number of points, but I think Sam had a couple more wins than us. So, but no, genuine race winner, that one.
And that's a lovely story. And again, something else we're going to have here. And you've brought one of Scott Dixon's helmets along as well that we're going to be able to have on display. And I do love that one. We'll get the camera on it a little bit later. And it's still got the muck and the dirt on from where it's been raced. And we're going to make sure we don't clean that one when it's here. Andy, I just want to say thank you so much for coming along. These stories and insights, I mean, I genuinely have goosebumps hearing some of these bits, and some of those insights from a unique point of view from an engineer. It's amazing, and thank you for loaning us these fabulous items across the course of
glad people get to see them, because they're normally just shut away.
And again, thank you so much for coming along.
More than welcome. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Cheers now.